Hello, welcome to this episode of Sir Reil Reviews, and we have just finished playing Wonderland's War, a battle of territory in Alice in Wonderland's setting, in which I lost horribly. So I was playing Alice, the titular character, and unfortunately she got crushed by
the Mad Hatter. Yeah, it is my tea party after all. So I showed these guys a little bit of how to play this game, and showed them a little bit about how to lose this game, I guess.
Well, I learned how to do that, for sure.
Yeah.
It's not about whether you win or lose. It's about whether you've cut off some people's heads.
Alright, so thoughts on the game. So something I really... Actually, there's a lot of elements I really liked about this game. I'll be brief. The look of the game is fantastic. So the colors, the artwork, the miniatures, the component quality, all of that is absolutely fantastic. It has a lot of features of games that I really like. So there's a bit of Quacks of Quedlinburg, which I think is a beautiful, wonderful game. It's got some of that element with push your luck and draws, but with a lot more flavor to it. So it's a lot more thematic.
Yeah.
But with the use of madness and combat and that sort of thing.
It's got the bag building aspect that I think you like from Quacks, right? And it's, each one of your chips, as you pull them out, all have a different ability that comes along with them. So.
And it's asymmetrical, which I love in any game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're doing all positives
right now.
I got a lot.
We'll get to the negatives later.
Too.
Yeah,
this one's shooting way up for me in my favorite games list. Since I got it, I've only been able to play it a handful of times, but every time that I play it, it feels new because it is asymmetric. Something that I haven't shown these guys is actually you have different sets for your supporters or your allies here as well. So even the basic chips that all have special abilities this game, they can have different special abilities. So it makes the replay factor really high on a game like this. You can change your faction, which plays differently. You change your allies, which plays differently. I even find that I can use different strategies and still be effective in the game. So just, good points all around.
Well, I like the solid mix of randomness. There's lots of probability with you're adding chips to your bag, and you have to keep that in mind as you're drawing chips, how likely you are to draw madness versus something else. Mm-hmm. So you push your luck a lot, but I like that you can plan ahead a little bit. There's cards on the table which give you abilities, so you can sort of plot your movement. There's action selection, a bit like Tokaido, and then there's an area control element, so it's like 3 different games matched together, and they all work the whole system works pretty seamlessly, I think.
Cool.
I like the components; they're awesome.
Yeah, I love the components that came out for this game. I of course went in with the deluxe version, so I've got the big miniatures, which are kind of nice. I guess kind of wish that you had different bases that you could apply to the miniatures, because it gets a little bit hard, like. In our Meadow of Living Flowers over here, it's like, whose unicorn is that, right? So we end up grouping the components with the other units in there, just to kind of show you. But I could paint my miniatures. That would bring the leaders out a little bit better. But for the Wonderlandians, because you're always picking them up based off of cards, they change hands every game. So
that's something you can do the Blood Rage style. Yeah, it's just like Blood Rage does would be a good idea. But it's just keeping them separate with your pieces. I didn't find it was a huge challenge. Dislikes. There's not a whole lot to dislike. I can only think of 2 minor negatives. The first one being I got absolutely crushed by the Mad Hatter. The second one being that the Red Queen's just an awful, awful person who abused, not only executed some of my followers, but treats her employees terribly.
Yeah. So do you want to do best and worst? What is the best feature of this game for you, Bryant?
Best feature of this game for me... I think it's the theme. I think I'm a theme player. I try to win. I try to compete, but I love theme way more than I love winning. So I like getting involved in a game. And the way that madness plays into this and how the combat works and everything, it's nutty enough while still being comprehensible. Like, it's not nonsense. It's easy to follow what's going on. But at the same time, it really does have that nice kind of Wonderlandy feel to it. With the weird characters and all that sort of thing.
Okay. Do you want to do your worst, or do you want me to do my best?
Well, I already said my worst.
Oh, your worst was the fact that I was playing against you?
It was you two.
Okay, so my best aspect of this game I actually have to say is the fact that you don't need to or sometimes even want to win the fights in every location. It is an area control game where you sometimes want to fight and you sometimes don't. And there are some places you want to win, and there are some places that you really don't care about winning. There are feat cards in the game. The way that I gained most of my points from this last game that we played were actually from completing feats. So I have a bunch of quest cards here, and each one of these is an objective that I have to accomplish during combat, which is like have 2 or 6 chips in my active chip row. Well, that's not necessarily going to win me the fight there, but it's still worth 3 or 6 points at the end of the game, so I can sacrifice winning a 6-point area for gaining a guaranteed 6 points from my feat. I love that about the game, that it forces you to combat everybody every time, but you don't feel bad losing the combat every time.
Not every time.
Not every time.
I think that's a great point. That, your goal isn't necessarily to win every combat. Sometimes your goal is to achieve the goal on your card, which you may or may not involve you winning.
Yeah.
And I think my favorite and my least favorite thing, they actually are kind of the same thing, which might seem odd. But I really like how the 3 elements, the 3 main mechanisms work together. You have, the action selection and the area control and the bag building. And they work together really well. Mm-hmm. But then, on the other hand, it makes the game very full and long. Like our game was about 2 hours, and I don't know if I'd feel comfortable adding. Maybe I'd add one more player, but how many does it go up to?
It does go up to 5. I don't know if that's a Kickstarter exclusive thing, but I think we played the 4-player game once. I don't think I've played a 5-player game, but I'd agree the 5-player game would be very long.
Yeah, I feel like that'd be beyond my palette as to what I think would be appealing. And generally I like a game that lasts more around the hour mark. Mm-hmm. But that said, actually the game felt like the pace was.
It doesn't
fast.
drag.
It didn't feel like 2 hours.
It's not like you're waiting for like 15 minutes between turns.
So yeah, I don't. The system works really well, despite how long and how. I don't want to use the word bloated because I don't think anything in here is necessarily unnecessary, except maybe the cubes and the disc could have been the same, but.
Yeah, I mean,
it's so minor.
I think if I was to throw a negative at some of the quote unquote bloat, I would say the Wonderlandians, as cool as they are, they just seem to not get used that much. And it's like if you grab
get used to those guys.
Yeah, so a couple of them, I find that the miniature ones are very strong when you can get an extra unit on the ground, like my Griffin. But I used my Griffin's power once, and he was done, kind of thing, right? And a lot of times when you're taking the cards for the Wonderlandians, you don't get to put supporters out in their place, so you are paying a heavy cost to get the Wonderlandian cards. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of them in the deck. You don't get to see a lot of them. And I find that like when you take the Wonderlandian chips, you really don't get to see them very often in your deck. But if I had to say like my absolute my biggest negative about the game is just that almost that push your luck mechanism, and that's probably just a personal thing for me. I've never been the biggest fan of push luck games because I'm really unlucky, and just drawing that madness, and we saw it in the last game we played. Roman got unfortunate madness draws, and he ended up losing a couple of bad combats.
But I was
just busting.
I was in a disadvantage anyway, so
I mean, I think my strategy was to build up my bag of really strong chips, so in the last round I could. Hopefully draw a lot of the powerful ones, but unfortunately I just got some madness early on.
You had so much madness going in.
So I could have mitigated that a bit by having more supporters on the board or something. So a little bit of change in strategy could also really affect.
There's definite mitigation to it.
I think it could also affect how a person enjoys the game. If they don't really think of a strategy at the beginning, they might feel like the game is working against them.
Yeah, and the randomness in the game can sometimes be a bit high.
It can, but I'm just going to throw this in there. It's hard to have a game about madness without randomness.
That's a very fair point. Yeah. Well, overall, I really enjoy the game. Like I said, it's rising in my favorite games.
The madness mechanism and the chaos, they fit Wonderland so perfectly.
Yeah. Fit the theme real good.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you very much for all joining us. I would highly recommend Wonderland's War if you get the opportunity to play it. So thank you for joining us, and have some real fun gaming. I'm just going to be throwing real puns out as much as possible.
Yeah. Okay, cool.